In some instances, it is preferable to withhold certain information. There are instances where the truth is simply more easily concealed. However, in my case, I decided to divulge the details of an extramarital affair I had engaged in for a period of 8 weeks. This decision ultimately proved to be misguided. I had not anticipated the emotional response my husband would have to this revelation. It was akin to a nuclear explosion of emotions. My hope was that by being transparent, I could influence his perspective and encourage him to understand and calm down. Instead, he took a different course of action. I had not anticipated this outcome. I am Becky, and I have been married to my husband for 3 years. During this period, he has been absorbed in his work, rarely returning home. Loneliness has become a constant presence in my life, and I have begun to feel as though I were living on a deserted island in our own home. These past 3 years have been characterized by a pervasive sense of gloom. I had envisioned a marriage where my husband would be by my side, present and engaged. However, the reality of our marriage has diverged from this ideal. My husband's name is Andrew, and he is 28 years old. A year has elapsed since the last communication. The demands of the job are considerable, and the surgeon's schedule is accordingly demanding. Long hours and night shifts are common, and on some days, it seems as though the surgeon is barely visible. I rarely have the opportunity to see him on weekends, and when I do, it is often on a day that is essentially a workday. Our relationship has suffered as a result, and we have become less communicative than we once were. We have become distant from each other. Regular date nights and attending events together have become a thing of the past. Andrew now feels like a stranger, and our quality time has vanished into thin air. This is not what I signed up for, it is not what I had in mind when we tied the knot. I understand that his job is a big deal, and I am not trying to be selfish, but let me tell you that it has been a mental drain. I have tried everything to make this marriage work, even sitting down for a heart-to-heart. To conclude, I have attempted to engage in meaningful discourse with Andrew on numerous occasions, yet he consistently focuses on the demands of his profession. On one occasion, I waited patiently for him to return home so that we could discuss matters, but he quickly provided an excuse, claiming that he was too tired and not in the mood for a conversation. I am quoting him accurately, he stated that he was too tired to engage in a conversation. With the man I married, this results in me being perceived as a nagging wife, someone who is always giving her husband a hard time when he gets home. It is almost as if I am married to a stranger now, because the Andrew I knew is nowhere to be found. This is not the same guy I dated back then. He showered me with attention and all the care in the world. It should be noted that I am not lacking in material comforts or anything of that nature. My husband works hard to provide for both of us, and we are financially stable. However, I am still longing for his emotional attention. Money is not the be-all and end-all, at least not for me. Andrew does not seem to grasp that his wife also needs some TLC, the kind of attention he gives to his patients at the hospital. He is under the impression that everything is hunky-dory with me because I have all the comforts a wife could ask for to make her home cozy. However, when was the last time we even went out together or attended an event like a regular couple? I remember going to a fundraiser all by myself once, feeling incredibly lonely as I watched other couples. It appeared that I was the only one enjoying myself, as others kept asking where Andrew was. I had to provide excuses for his absence, which occurred with some regularity. This prompted me to consider whether he was deliberately avoiding me or if there was something more sinister afoot. Was he having an affair with a colleague, using his job as a pretext? I have attempted to arrange a surprise birthday party for Andrew on one occasion, inviting friends since our families live far away. However, the event did not proceed as planned, and I was forced to rely on our friends to ensure that the day was memorable for him on the morning of his birthday. I attempted to wish him a happy birthday before heading off to work. We both woke up that morning, and I greeted him with birthday wishes and sang a brief song to put a smile on his face. He appeared happy, and I could see a grin on his face as he left for work. Once he was out the door, I began work on the party plans. I rented a hall and, with the help of our friends, decorated it to make it look festive. I added a personal touch by baking a cake for Andrew. Furthermore, I arranged for all the food and drinks for the guests. I sent out a message to our friends, urging them not to spill the beans and spoil the surprise. Everyone cooperated, and Andrew remained clueless about the impending celebration. Everything was ready to roll. People started arriving at the venue about 30 minutes before the scheduled party time, which was at 8 o'clock. At 8 o'clock, the saxophonist and the music band were all set and everything was going according to my plan. The only remaining element was for the birthday boy, Andrew, to show up. The guests were eager to see the man of the hour, and I was ready to take their calls. I decided to give Andrew a call to let him know about the. I informed him that I wished to organize a surprise party for his 28th birthday. My intention was to demonstrate my enduring love for him. Andrew had not always been like this, and it was not simply a matter of his work. Rather, it was his attitude and the lack of attention that was having a detrimental effect on my mental and emotional well-being. The catalyst for this situation was Andrew's promotion at work. While this was not inherently problematic, it has had a negative impact on our relationship. I have noticed a significant decline in our communication, with minimal contact at home. I attempted to reach him on the phone, but his line was unavailable for the first 2 minutes. I remained patient and continued trying to contact him, feeling increasingly desperate. After a few minutes of unsuccessful attempts to contact him, I sought the assistance of Andrew's close friend, Stan Lee. Stan and Andrew had been friends since childhood and shared a strong bond. I approached Stan privately, not wanting to create a scene, and explained the situation. Stan took it upon himself to help. I attempted to contact Andrew by telephone, but the call was unsuccessful. My mind was flooded with various thoughts. I was compelled to consider the possibility that Andrew had chosen to celebrate his birthday with the woman he might be cheating on me with at a fancy restaurant. Meanwhile, I had been occupied with the preparations for a surprise birthday party. I was preoccupied with thoughts of the party I had organized for him. I became so absorbed in my thoughts that I failed to notice Stanley suggesting that I send him a text message and give calling him another chance. I tried calling him once more, and this time it actually went through. I was thrilled because Andrew's phone was finally reachable. My excitement soared and I anxiously waited for him to pick up. Despite my best efforts to reach him, Andrew did not respond to any of my attempts. This only served to compound my frustration, and I began to feel increasingly agitated. Stanley also attempted to contact him, but like me, he received no response. I noticed that the guests began to express their frustration, inquiring about the status of the situation. It had been an hour, and there was still no sign of the birthday boy in the hall. Stanley proposed that I continue attempting to contact Andrew while he attempted to reassure the guests. He was ultimately successful in persuading them to remain calm and wait for further developments. After a brief interval, I returned to the location where I had been previously. We continued our attempts to reach Andrew, but it seemed as though he had vanished into thin air. The situation was quite distressing. I was embarrassed to the point of feeling ashamed. It was not a situation that could be considered humorous. I was unable to invite my friends and Andrew's friends to come. And then, to my great disappointment, he failed to show up, leaving us all to wait for what seemed like an eternity. It felt as though all my efforts had been in vain. What was I supposed to tell all those people who had gathered there? The person for whom I had organized this surprise, my husband, was ignoring my calls and messages. I was utterly dumbfounded by what was unfolding. By 9 o'clock, Andrew was still nowhere to be seen. Understandably, the guests began to leave one by one, utterly disgusted by how I had managed to waste their time with a birthday party that the guest of honor hadn't even attended. It was one of those moments where I wished I could hide my face due to the negative comments and disappointment in the air as the guests departed. It left only Stanley and me in the now empty hall. I felt deeply betrayed and furious about how everything had turned out. Stanley advised me to head home while he proceeded to address the situation at hand. Upon returning home, I was overcome with emotion, crying uncontrollably. I was perplexed by the circumstances and struggled to comprehend why Andrew had suddenly changed. We had previously been quite different, so I was uncertain as to what had caused this shift. These thoughts continued to occupy my mind as I drove home. Upon arriving, I made my way to the bedroom, awaiting Andrew's return. A few minutes later, he came back and found me in a state of distress. He inquired about my well-being, and I inquired about the whereabouts of his phone. My husband's phone was not on silent or any other mode that would indicate he was not available to receive calls or messages. I asked him if he had not seen my calls or messages, but he merely offered an apology and stated that he was unable to respond to calls or messages at that time. There was no indication that he was curious about why I had been contacting him repeatedly or any indication of remorse. Andrew and I engaged in a heated argument. I expressed my disappointment and frustration about how I had gone to great lengths to plan a surprise birthday. I had planned a celebration for him, inviting friends to join in, only for him to ruin it. Andrew stuck to his usual excuse of being swamped with work, which only served to exacerbate my frustration. I eventually stormed out of the room, unable to bear the situation any longer as the weeks passed. Andrew's late-night shifts grew more grueling, and it seemed as though his profession was tailor-made for late hours. We stopped watching movies together, sharing meals, and following our usual daily routines, and I found myself living in a state of turmoil. I had chosen to be a full-time. Following discussions with Andrew prior to our marriage, I had agreed to become a housewife. However, I had not foreseen that this would result in such a lack of fulfillment. It was not the life I had envisaged, and I had no intention of continuing in this direction. It was not that I had a problem with being at home and taking care of our family and household. What was truly frustrating was having a partner who did not give me any attention or make an effort to spend time bonding as a couple. I could not recall the last time Andrew had given me a gift. I was pretty sure he had forgotten our anniversary date. Given that he was hosting his own surprise birthday party, it was highly unlikely that he would be present for our anniversary. I had reached a breaking point with Andrew's indifferent behavior and was extremely frustrated. The way I communicated with my husband had completely deteriorated. He was unresponsive to my calls and messages, and when he came home late at night, having a conversation with him was next to impossible. This abrupt change drove me to seek attention elsewhere, and I ended up cheating. It is true that I cheated on Andrew. I began spending time with an old friend from college named Patrick. He was a year ahead of me in school and was considered one of the most attractive guys on campus. One day, while scrolling through my Facebook newsfeed, I received a friend request from Patrick, which I accepted without any ulterior motives. We began chatting casually for a few weeks, sharing details about our daily lives. Our conversations deepened and we exchanged contact information. Patrick and I started texting and talking on the phone late into the night, and sometimes he would even come over to keep me company. What began innocently soon turned into a close bond, and we went on a few dates. Patrick and I engaged in clandestine romantic encounters. Despite my awareness that he was aware of my marital status, I concealed our relationship from Andrew. This arrangement persisted for several months, during which time I experienced a sense of self-discovery. I had nearly forgotten that I was married due to the manner in which Andrew had treated me in the past. Patrick provided the attention I had longed for, noticing and appreciating every detail. He made an effort to bring a smile to my face. It was a surreal experience, as I had never believed that someone could listen to me and give me the undivided attention I craved. I began to believe that Patrick might be the one for me. I gradually ceased to consider Andrew in my thoughts. I had no intention of committing adultery or causing any harm to our marriage. Andrew was unaware of the impact of his late-night shifts and frequent absences on our relationship. He was unable to reconcile his personal and professional lives, and I held him responsible for this imbalance. I believed that he had chosen work over our marriage and had neglected to provide me with the attention he had previously given to his job. I did not regret my involvement with Patrick. It had brought me a sense of vitality over the past few months. On the Friday afternoon at around noon, my husband Andrew returned from work with several bags. The items he had purchased were from the store. I was somewhat surprised to see him returning home so early, as he rarely did so in the afternoon. Indeed, there were occasions when he did not return until the following day. He approached me with the bags and handed them over, stating that he had purchased them for me. I looked puzzled and asked if everything was all right with him. He replied in the affirmative, stating that Andrew had bought him a dress, a wristwatch, a bag, and a pair of shoes. He suggested that I try them on because he wanted to take me out for dinner. I was somewhat taken aback by this suggestion, as I had not expected it. However, I agreed to go out with him. It had been a considerable length of time since my husband had taken me out on a date. In fact, I had lost count of the last occasion on which he had done so. This particular moment was simultaneously bittersweet for me. On the one hand, I was already involved with someone else. On the other, however, my husband was finally making an effort to spend time with me. Andrew continued with this sudden change in behavior, showering me with gifts, taking me out, going on dates with me and attending social events together. We began to spend quality time together, as couples typically do. He no longer came home late at night and his night shifts. Andrew's behavior became less frequent on our anniversary. He threw a surprise party for me and promised to make amends for the way he had treated me. I was genuinely happy to see my husband recognizing his mistakes and wanting to make things right again. I cherished those moments for quite a while, all the while realizing that Andrew had no knowledge of my infidelity. He was unaware that I had cheated on him during the times he neglected to give me attention. You might be wondering what happened between me and Patrick. Well, not much really. Patrick and I continued seeing each other as we had been. Initially, I believed Andrew's transformation to be transient. However, it persisted for several months. He ceased working on weekends, which we utilized to watch movies and prepare meals together. I nostalgically recalled those days when Andrew and I would cook, clean, and perform household chores together. Our relationship flourished during that period. However, it deteriorated when he received a promotion at work. His increased workload led to feelings of isolation and neglect within the home. Conversely, the past few months have been a welcome change. My husband has finally begun to provide the attention I have long sought. We have rekindled our bond and have grown closer. During this period, Patrick, my extramarital partner, became increasingly demanding. He felt that I was giving him less attention and ignoring him ever since Andrew started paying more attention to me. He was, to some extent, correct in this assessment. Andrew's newfound attention made me reflect on my actions and I began to feel guilty. However, I could not entirely blame myself for the situation I had gotten into. I spent a considerable amount of time contemplating the situation and decided that I needed to come clean with Andrew. I wanted to make things right by confessing that I had cheated on him. I informed him of the situation with Patrick, my former schoolmate. The guilt was a significant burden and I could no longer bear it. I ended our relationship with Patrick, explaining that I could not continue seeing him and that I wanted to resolve the issue with Andrew. Patrick was not receptive to this decision and persistently attempted to contact me. I had to block his calls and messages and warned him not to visit me, particularly given that Andrew was spending more time at home. A few weeks after ending things with Patrick, the guilt continued to weigh heavily on me. Andrew's presence and his complete unawareness of the knowledge that I had been unfaithful to my husband was causing me significant distress. I was aware that if Andrew were to discover the truth, it would be my responsibility to do so. However, I was too fearful of his reaction to confess. Consequently, I decided to wait for an opportune moment to reveal the truth to my husband. One day, while Andrew and I were at home, I watched a film and, with great trepidation, revealed that I had been engaging in an illicit relationship with Patrick for the past 8 weeks. Despite my nervousness, I observed that my husband was wholly absorbed in the television program and did not appear to notice my distress. Consequently, I seized the opportunity to seize the remote control and I pressed the pause button, which caused Andrew to become visibly startled. He inquired as to the urgency of my interruption, demanding to know why I seemed so anxious. After taking a moment to compose myself, I proceeded to divulge the details of my affair with Patrick. I proceeded to recount the details to Andrew. I could discern the gradual intensification of shock and anger on his face. His reaction reached a crescendo, culminating in the hurling of his glass of wine at the wall in a fit of rage with each word I spoke. Andrew's fury appeared to intensify, and he began smashing various items around the room. I was overcome with fear and felt compelled to flee the increasingly volatile situation. I sought refuge with my sister, Tricia, and proceeded to divulge the entire truth to her. I explained the reasons behind my infidelity and the subsequent deception of Andrew. The conversation was lengthy, but eventually, Tricia attempted to calm me down. She suggested that I call Andrew so that she could speak with him and hopefully help to defuse the situation. I made the call, but Andrew did not answer and did not respond to any of my messages. Tricia and I continued calling for approximately half an hour, but despite my sister's advice to rest, I was unable to obtain a response from my husband. I attempted to contact him again the following morning, but the call was initially successful, only to become unavailable shortly afterwards. I persisted, but it appeared that Andrew had blocked my calls and messages. I was eager to communicate with him and clarify my actions, yet weeks passed with no communication from Andrew. Consequently, Tricia accompanied me back to the house. Upon arrival, we observed Andrew attempting to gain access to his vehicle. Upon leaving the compound, I hastened to him, eager to engage in discourse. However, my attempts to communicate were met with indifference. Andrew abruptly closed the car door, ordering our gatekeeper to expel me from the premises before driving away. This was a profound and emotionally distressing experience. I was at a loss as to how I had ended up in this unfortunate situation. Andrew did not even spare me a second glance at that moment. I felt as though I had been repulsed by him, and I was filled with sorrow as I left with Tricia. My heart was heavy with sorrow. I could not bear the thought of returning to the place that had once been our loving home. It seemed as though my 3-year marriage was disintegrating right before my eyes and slipping through my fingers. The marriage was disintegrating rapidly, and I was becoming increasingly aware that it was slipping through my fingers. I wished that Andrew could see things from my perspective and understand that his late-night shifts and demanding work schedule, coupled with a lack of attention, were pushing me to the brink. I wanted to explain how I had begged for his attention and silently suffered in his absence. Now, I was beginning to regret coming clean and revealing the truth. How could he treat me this way after I chose to be honest instead of keeping him in the dark? Andrew sought revenge for my infidelity, which he perceived as a betrayal. His actions were unexpected and cruel. While it was natural for him to react strongly, I had no idea that he was capable of such cruelty. His revenge shattered me completely. It felt like he had been planning this all along, waiting for the perfect opportunity to ensnare me. Perhaps he had suspicions and just needed confirmation. I played right into his hands, like a fool. This experience has taught me a valuable lesson. I learned a valuable lesson from this experience. Several months passed and I hadn't heard a word from Andrew. I was growing increasingly frustrated and determined to mend things between us. I decided to pay him a visit at his place. When I arrived, the gatekeeper refused to let me enter the compound. He had strict instructions from Andrew not to allow me in. I pleaded with him, but he remained steadfast. It was clear that Andrew didn't want me anywhere near the house. After a heated back and forth with the gatekeeper, I finally managed to make my way in. I proceeded to enter the house, having previously passed the individual in question. The old passcode still functioned, prompting a surge of emotion as I stepped into what had once been my domicile. It had been so quiet, and Andrew was nowhere to be found inside, although his vehicle was parked outside. I proceeded further into the house, making my way to our bedroom, hoping to find Andrew there. Unfortunately, he was not present. It appeared as though he had departed before I arrived in the neighborhood. I spent some time feeling sorry for myself before noticing that my side of the room was completely empty. Initially, I believed my vision was playing tricks on me, but it turned out that I was seeing things clearly. None of my belongings remained in the house, which came as a shock because I hadn't had the chance to pack my things when I left hastily, fearing that Andrew might harm me. I had been borrowing my sister's clothes during my stay with her, and none of my bags, clothes, or shoes were left. Even my childhood photos and personal items were gone. The room looked as if I had never set foot in it before. I was taken aback. Had Andrew been present at that moment, I would have expressed my displeasure. I had been hoping to find some clothes to wear because I was tired of relying on my sister's wardrobe. Andrew had deceived me, and I impatiently awaited his return. All the fear that had been gnawing at me vanished, and I no longer felt intimidated by the idea of facing him alone after waiting for what seemed like an eternity. I was constantly bothered by the gatekeeper, who was worried about Andrew's reaction to finding me in his house. Finally, I heard the front door creak open and proceeded downstairs, assuming that Andrew had returned. However, to my surprise, it was not Andrew who stood at the door, but a tall woman. I was taken aback and inquired as to whether she might be lost, as that seemed to be the only logical explanation for a stranger being there. The woman actually chuckled and turned the question back on me, asking if I was the one who was lost. I was annoyed and demanded to know who she was. She introduced herself as Andrew's girlfriend, and for a moment I thought she was joking, but she was not. In that instant, my world was shattered once more by the realization that Andrew had a girlfriend. My mind raced with various scenarios, none of which were pleasant. I could not help but suspect that she might have been the same woman he was cheating on me with. I might have been overthinking, but I was in no state to make rational decisions. The audacity of this woman astounded me as she told me to leave. I identified myself as Andrew's wife, but she was well aware of that. Then she had the nerve to tell me that I was soon to be the ex. My wife, I must admit, I had the urge to confront her immediately, but I managed to control myself. I inquired about my belongings and where she had stashed them. She admitted to getting rid of most of my things and selling the rest because Andrew had given everything to her, instructing her to do as she pleased. My composure was suddenly lost, and I seized her shirt with an unthinking impulse. My anger overwhelmed my capacity for reason, and I grasped her hair in a tight grip, demanding to know the whereabouts of my childhood photographs. She responded with a calm and detached demeanor, informing me that she had burned them. I was enraged, and I was on the verge of pulling her hair out by the roots. Despite her attempts to resist, I had a significant size advantage, and she was too stunned to put up much of a fight. It is difficult to comprehend how Andrew could have the nerve to do this to me. How could he entrust a stranger with my possessions? How could he let a total stranger be in charge of my childhood photos? While items such as clothes bags and boxes are important, they do not carry the same emotional weight as photographs. Even items such as jewelry and makeup pale in comparison to the loss of cherished photos. I have lived with my stepfather and mother throughout my life due to the passing of my biological father before I was born. My stepfather did not fulfill the role of a good father. I eagerly awaited the day of my wedding, which would allow me to gain independence from my stepfather and mother. I had taken all my photographs with me, as I did not wish to leave any behind with them. Consequently, I was extremely distressed when Andrew handed those pictures over to a complete stranger. No one can console me, as Andrew was aware of the sentimental value I placed on those photographs. His actions were therefore particularly hurtful. I had previously discussed this with him, so I was aware that he deliberately made that choice, as I struggled with the woman. Andrew entered the house, and immediately the separation was a source of considerable distress to me, although I was unaware that the gatekeeper had informed him of my presence while he was at work. I questioned Andrew about his actions, but he remained silent. He then grabbed my hand and forcibly ushered me out of the house, instructing me to leave and never return. I was astonished that he had taken the side of I was a complete stranger to him, yet he had taken it upon himself to tear my childhood photos to pieces without even hearing my side of the story. I was utterly shocked and dismayed by his actions. I had never expected such a heartless act from him. I inquired as to why he had allowed that woman to destroy my childhood photos, but he replied that he couldn't care less about what had happened. I inquired as to whether he was aware of the consequences of his actions, as his response would determine my next move. He confirmed that he was fully aware and that he had given the orders in a fit of anger. I then slapped him across the face, which caused him to be taken aback by my actions. He later attempted to confront me again, but the gatekeeper intervened and restrained him from taking any further action. Andrew's betrayal caused me immense pain, as it was the first time that he had ever hurt me in such a profound manner. I left the house and did not have any further contact with him. I proceeded to my stepmother and stepfather's house, as my sister was unable to provide sufficient sustenance for both of us. However, upon my arrival, I was confronted with another traumatic revelation. Andrew had engaged in a conversation with my stepmother and stepfather, during which he divulged the details of our relationship. This was a significant blow to me. My parents are devoutly religious and have zero tolerance for infidelity or dishonesty. They were unwilling to take me back into their home after hearing what had transpired. My own mother even turned me away. I had low expectations from my stepfather, as we were never close. However, my mother's response was unexpected. I was genuinely taken aback. I departed their residence and returned to my sister's place, where I recounted the entire incident to her. She offered to provide assistance, but I reassured her that I would relocate within a 2-month period. 2 weeks have elapsed, and I am currently exploring potential avenues for financial stability. Candidly, the truth did not. The act of being honest with him only resulted in a greater degree of distress and anguish. In retrospect, perhaps it would have been more prudent to present a less truthful account. This experience has instilled a sense of caution regarding future interactions. There is no intention of ever seeing Andrew again, and the decision has been made to file for divorce. The expectation has been that he would take the initiative, but this has not occurred. I have not yet received any communication from him regarding the divorce proceedings. Nevertheless, I am resolved to proceed with the divorce and will pursue alimony or spousal support, if that is what the legal process requires. I was wronged by this individual, and I am determined to do what is best for myself. As a single person, I have come to realize that my life is not as despite the commonly held perception that single life is glamorous. I have found it to be less enjoyable than I initially anticipated. Indeed, I had not anticipated any enjoyment whatsoever. However, maintaining a sense of humor has helped me to cope with the challenges I am facing for the first time in my life. I am entirely self-reliant. I have found that relying on myself is one of the most empowering feelings I have ever experienced. I was eager to leave my stepfather's house, so I got married quickly. However, now that I am on my own, I am learning the true meaning of independence. I filed for divorce and it was finalized within 3 months. Andrew and his lawyer offered me a fair settlement, and I was financially secure as soon as my lawyer examined the agreement. He advised me to accept it. Andrew must have realized the extent of the damage he had caused me when it was all said and done. My feelings were a combination of bitterness and relief. I left my sister's place and secured a rental apartment for myself. I hold a degree in history and am now gainfully employed. I recently received my first paycheck. Andrew and his new girlfriend have been observed frequently in public, accompanied by numerous photographs on social media. This is somewhat unusual, as Andrew had previously demonstrated little interest in social media during our relationship. However, he has recently become quite active on social media, sharing a great deal of content. During our time together, Andrew frequently claimed to be overwhelmed with work. However, he suddenly began making an effort to spend more time on social media. I later discovered that he had intentionally started sharing content on social media. Andrew began showering me with extra attention after his friend Stanley warned him about the possibility of me cheating if he didn't give me the attention I desired. Andrew was afraid of being embarrassed after what happened at his birthday party and wanted to say face-to-face with his friends. It would appear that they had discussed the situation behind his back and he wanted to avoid any further embarrassment. However, I have moved past all of this, and when Stanley tried to approach me, I declined to engage in a conversation with him, as I have no further interest in him and wish to maintain a distance. Andrew is now a part of my history, and I genuinely hope that I never encounter such a person again. I may regret revealing the truth, but I am also relieved that I did so. My emotions are complex, but I believe that everything that unfolded was destined to happen. I am now focused on my job and ensure that I get a good night's sleep so that I can start my workday.